This is the Tom Bigby Tales, and I'm your host, Shannon Evans. I write about a small town in northeast Mississippi called Columbus. Sometimes I write about the rest of the state, and it's a hot summer night, so bear with me. Tonight, we're going to be continuing with our investigation of the Columbus Housing Authority, and I have some information that I got from their, what do you call it? They had an audit done. They have to have an audit done every year. I want you to see this audit because I'm going to read from it. What's really important is to note that in the previous year, they had an audit done and there were no findings, which I find interesting. But this year, this audit, which is for 2023, they had some significant issues. So let's get into it. Columbus Housing Authority is Columbus Housing Authority plus the Columbus Community Housing Development Organization, or CHODO. CHODO is their nonprofit arm. The Columbus Housing Authority is governed by a board of commissioners, and they have an executive director who works for them, and he is in charge of the day-to-day operations and the oversight of the monies, but he's also supposed to report back to the commissioners, and he's supposed to keep them informed, and he's also supposed to have things like checks signed by at least the president of the Board of Commission. Okay, so let's start. This whole thing is 50-something pages, but we're not going to go into all that. But it goes on and on and on. So the group who did the independent auditors report is this group, Smith Marion. This is what they do. They're professional auditors. They work with a lot of HUD-related organizations like regional offices of HUD and housing authorities like Columbus. This is for the 2023 fiscal year. And as you can see, this one is dated the following year of 2024. They're talking about their report on internal control over financial reporting. And it states, in planning and performing our audit, we consider the authority's internal control over financial reporting. Internal control is a basis for designing audit procedures that are appropriate in the circumstances for the purposes of expressing our opinion on financial statements. So this is all about the financials. If there's a deficiency in internal control and it exists, then that's when the design or the operation of a control does not allow management or employees in the normal course of performing their assigned functions to prevent, detect, and correct misstatements on a timely manner. A material weakness is a deficiency or a combination of deficiencies in internal control, such that there is reasonable responsibility that a material misstatement of the authority's financial statements will not be prevented or detected and corrected in a timely basis. A significant deficiency, this is what's critical. A significant deficiency is a deficiency or a combination of deficiencies in internal control that is less severe than a material weakness, yet important enough to merit attention by those charged with governance. So, we're going to be looking at how these deficiencies are examined and what they are in this finding of 2023. So let's get into it. So in this, they state that they have audited Columbus Housing Authority's compliance with types of compliance requirements identified as subject to audit in the OMB Compliance Supplement. That is a governing document that the housing authorities all use that could have a direct and material effect on each of Columbus Housing Authority's major federal programs for the year that ended December 31st, 2023. That is the year that's being audited. Columbus Housing Authority's Major federal programs are identified in the summary of the auditor's results section of the accompanying schedule. In our opinion, Columbus Housing Authority complied in all material aspects with the compliance requirements referred to above that could have a direct and material effect on each of its federal programs for the year that ended December 31st, 2023. We conducted our audit of compliance in accordance with auditing standards. This is the money side, not the material, not the building side, the money side. And they continue on. They talk about they're required to be independent of the Columbus Housing Authority to meet ethical standards and responsibilities, et cetera, et cetera. And their audit does not provide a legal determination of the Housing Authority's compliance with the compliance requirements of HUD. This is mostly a way to help them remain compliant. So management of the Housing Authority is responsible for compliance with the requirements referred to above and for the design, implementation, and maintenance of effective internal control over compliance with the requirements of laws, statutes, regulations, rules, and provisions of contracts or grant agreements applicable to Columbus Housing Authority's federal programs. Then it talks about the responsibilities of the auditors. And then we get down here. Our consideration of internal control over compliance was for the limited purpose described in the auditor's responsibilities for the audit of compliance section above and was not designed to identify all deficiencies in internal control over compliance that might be material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in internal control over compliance. And therefore, material weaknesses or significant deficiencies may exist that were not yet identified. We did not identify any deficiencies in internal control over compliance that we consider to be material weaknesses. However, as discussed below, we did identify certain deficiencies in internal control over compliance that we consider to be significant deficiencies. And we shall continue. Let's talk about some of the things that were found. Our audit was not designed for the purpose of expressing an opinion on the effectiveness of internal control compliance. Accordingly, no such opinion is expressed. Government auditing standards requires the auditor to perform limited procedures on Columbus Housing Authority's response to the internal control over compliance findings identified in our audit described in the accompanying schedule of findings and question costs. Columbus Housing Authority's response was not subjected to the other auditing procedures applied in the audit of compliance, and accordingly, we expressed no opinion on the response. So let's go into what they found. And let's first talk about the previous years. In 2022, they did not identify any deficiencies in internal control over compliance. There were no audit findings that required disclosure to HUD or that identified any significant deficiencies. None. That was under the previous director, Deborah Taylor. Now, we are now going to look at 2023 by comparison. Were there material weaknesses identified? No, and they stated that above. However, were significant deficiencies identified? Yes. Non-compliance material to financial statements? No. Now, internal control over federal programs, were material weaknesses identified? No. This is major federal programs. This is the stuff, these federal awards, these are the ones that Rusty helps them with, this Rusty Walker guy. And he also helps them with somewhat with their financials, but mostly Robert is responsible for the financials. Robert Graythwaite. He is an accountant, remember? So we have issues up above, significant deficiencies identified. Yes, since Robert took over, there were none prior. I looked in the two previous audit reports, and there were no issues under Deborah Taylor. Not any were identified. So we have some of the financial statements, and then under the federal awards, there are significant deficiencies identified. And this is internal control over major federal programs. This is the money. This is the big money. This is the accounting of the money, and this is the management of the money. And there are problems. Any audit findings disclosed that are required to be reported in accordance with 2 CFR 200.516. Yes, there are. That's pretty serious. That means the auditors had to disclose to HUD and the Government Accounting Office that there were some findings that were troubling enough that they had to report them. That's pretty significant. Okay. Then they give what's the dollar value, et cetera, et cetera. So let's go on. What did they find in the financial statements? They were in non-compliance. This is what they reported. The criteria: the financial data schedule submission for unaudited financials are due within 2 months after the fiscal year ends. FDS audited submissions are due 9 months after fiscal year ends, and the Federal Audit Clearinghouse reporting package is due 30 days after receipt of the auditor's reports, or 9 months after the end of the fiscal year end. 24 CFR section 5.801. Now you can look these CFRs up. They're listed online. You can go read through them. Condition: management missed deadline for its unaudited REAC submission. Now, REAC is the Real Estate Assessment Center, and it's a program that evaluates the physical condition and the management of public housing related to HUD standards. That's incredibly important because what's the condition of your buildings? What is the condition of are you meeting the standards set by HUD? Are you in compliance? And they were not. So they missed their deadline for its unaudited REAC submission. Context: management did not submit the unaudited submission on time. Management failed. Who is management? Management is Robert. Cause: management was late in submitting its financial information to its fee accountant. This in part was caused by personnel changes that limited its ability to produce timely and reliable financial data. Now, I take objection with this, and here's why. He took over from Deborah Taylor as the director, the executive director. Prior to that, he was the assistant executive director. So it should have been a seamless transition. So they go from having 0 problems and 0 compliance issues, and when Robert takes over, they suddenly have compliance issues. Did he not do it? Did he blow it off? Did he not know how to do it? I don't know. You would think after these many years of going to all these workshops every month that he would know how. I mean, he spent over $50,000 so far this past year to go to workshops. You'd think he'd have this all figured out. Effect: the authority will receive a 1-point deduction for every 15 days that the submission is late, up to a maximum of 5 points. I wonder how many points they lost. We don't know. It doesn't say. We don't know when he finally submitted it. Recommendation: the authority needs to improve its internal controls over financial reporting by submitting its financial data on a timelier basis and modifying its procedures to minimize its reliance on external spreadsheets for financial information. This is Rusty. These external spreadsheets they have been working with Rusty Walker, who to the tune of almost $60,000 a year. And then everything is sent to this guy named Paul, and I can't remember his last name. Paul is an accountant that's probably a CPA. He's in Alabama, I believe. And so Robert's an accountant, so I don't understand why he's not doing the accounting, the basic accounting. He was the bookkeeper. So now they've hired an accountant. This should change. The management views are that they agree with the findings and have outlined a plan of action in a corrective action plan. Now, it will be interesting to see when the 2024 findings are published so that I can compare if they did improve or if they're still in non-compliance in their financial statements findings. Let's go to their financial awards findings. Now, this one is very disturbing to me. This is the part where Rusty has the most influence and has his hands in it directly. Federal awards findings, program name, low rent public housing, internal control, significant deficiency, inter-program due from activities. Are there any question costs? No. But what's the criteria? The criteria, according to PHA, Public Housing Authority, accounting brief number 14, due from relationships should not be reported under accrual accounting simply from the result of a PHA using a common checking or working capital account. This is the part where Rusty gives him his advice. This is where that money's being moved around. Because of the basic nature of most federal and state programs, resources from one program cannot be used to support the cost of another program. HUD views due tos and due froms reported in PHA federal programs as possible indicators of non-compliance. So they've been taking Rob and Peter to pay Paul and using money intended for other projects to cover different projects. Condition. The authority has interfund receivables and payables that have not been repaid as of fiscal year end. This results in certain programs having a negative cash balance as of fiscal year end. That's a big no-no. Remember when I spoke earlier about Rusty telling them how to do draws? That's what this is how these draws are done. Now, I have always questioned whether Rusty Walker is qualified to be doing this. I've done a little bit of research, and based on what I've found, he doesn't have the qualifications that HUD requires when one contracts a capital management person or organization to advise on these types of matters. Usually they have certain certifications, and he doesn't fit that. So that'll be interesting to see what happens after going through these and making the world aware of that. The context of this is the authority reported a material 549,444 in total, 496,338 in the PHA program. The amount of interfund receivables and payables, which is a significant red flag for HUD reviewers. So HUD would get really ticked about this. Cause, the authority was not effectively monitoring and managing interfund program balances in order to ensure that programs were not spending funds they do not have. Like I said, they were robbing Peter to pay Paul. Effect. The use of due to, due from transactions reported in the authority's financials net to some programs have negative cash balances. This is why they had no money in accounts and had to move money around and got caught with their pants down and had to pay extra fees for bouncing checks. That's a big no-no with HUD. This could signify to HUD that one or more programs have used resources to cover the cost of another program. Now, what is that called when you are moving money around and not paying for things that you're supposed to with what you have? And I mean, that's a serious offense. It's got a name. It'll come to me. Recommendations. The authority should expand its control over cash reconciliations to include a step to verify if a program, fund, or component unit is accurate along with the entire cash pool. Also, interfunds should be repaid monthly at a minimum. Now, it says management's got a corrective action plan. Let's go look and see if we can find that. As it says right here, in the previous years, there were no prior findings. So this has started since Robert's taken over. So management's corrective action plan. And let's see in 2024 if he did this. Understand deadlines, become familiar with the submission deadlines for both unaudited and audited financial data. Create a timeline, develop a detailed timeline that includes all key dates and milestones leading up to the submission deadline. This will include internal review periods and time for corrections. I know what I'm asking for in my next public records request. Assign responsibilities, clearly define roles and responsibilities within our team to ensure that each part of the submission process is covered. Regular check-ins, schedule regular check-ins to monitor progress and address any issues that may arise early on. Use HUD tools. Utilize HUD's FDS submission upload tool and other resources to streamline the data entry and submission process. Perform completeness checks before submitting. Perform a submission completeness check to ensure all required data is accurate and complete. Request extensions if needed. Backup documentation. Let's go to the money part. Interfund repayment. Identify interfund transaction. List all interfund transactions, including payables, payroll, reimbursements, etc. Time out, guys. I got to get a drink of water. I was getting vocal fried. Record transaction. Ensure all interfund transactions are recorded in the general ledger. Reconcile balances. Reconcile the balances of all interfund accounts between each fund. Investigate discrepancies. I wonder how they coded the discrepancy of the truck, that $60,000 truck that they're now $90,000 into. Wonder if this falls under that discrepancies. Documentation. Maintain thorough documentation for all interfund transactions. Additionally, regular monitoring and periodic review of the effectiveness of the implemented controls will be conducted to ensure ongoing compliance and continuous improvement. Respectfully submitted, Robert Guthrie, Executive Director. Well, 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 I think we shall be asking for all of these documents. What do you think? I find it all very interesting that they go from the two previous years of 2020, 2021, and 2022, the three previous years. I find no deficiencies identified in internal control over compliance, no audit findings, nothing requiring that they need to go to HUD to tell them that these people have screwed up and have significant deficiencies. No, 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 no. And then as soon as Robert Guthrie takes over, yes, they have deficiencies in internal control. Yes, they have audit findings. Their internal control is non-compliant, and the auditors have to disclose to HUD these deficiencies. I can't believe that this guy still has his job. I can't wait to see the 2024 audit. I wonder what deficiencies they have, because I don't see that they have any of these things under control at this point, especially based on the financials that we saw and the emails from Rusty Walker and his organization, and dealing with the truck, dealing with the roofing, dealing with the air conditioning, all the projects. I don't see it. I don't see how any of this is going to be compliant. I think they're going to be out of compliance again in 2024, and I think they're still out of compliance. I don't know. I'd love to hear your input. Well, that's all I got for tonight, folks. But this is a doozy because this is pretty significant. And the more I look, the more I follow the money, the more questions I have. In my next episode, I'm going to go back to the financials and the credit cards because I think we need to have some pretty heavy discussions about some of the spending on those credit cards, especially when it comes to these trips, these trainings that he's going to. I mean, I wouldn't have much to say if the money and everything was in tip-top shape and was in compliance because I'd say, hey, he's doing great. That all that training's paying off, but um. Looks like all he does is go out and spend money. I'm not, he doesn't even do his job. What a shame. What a waste. Anyways, that's it for tonight. I want to thank you for coming on my podcast, The Tom Bigby Tales. Until next time, I'm Shannon Evans.